Whether you're brand new to gardening or you've been at it for years, you've probably stood in a garden center staring at a wall of bags wondering, what is all this stuff? And do I actually need it? Soil amendments can feel overwhelming fast. But here's the thing. Once you understand what each one does, you'll know exactly what to reach for and when. So let's break down every major soil amendment type. No fluff, no confusion. Just what it is, what it does, and when you'd actually use it. Let's go. Synthetic granular fertilizer. Okay, starting with the one you've probably already seen everywhere, synthetic granular fertilizer. This is your classic manufactured fertilizer, the kind that comes in a big plastic bag with three numbers on the front, like 10, 10, 10 or 20, 5, 10. Those numbers are your NPK ratio, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen for leafy green growth, phosphorus for roots and blooms, potassium for overall plant health. Synthetic granular is fast-acting, consistent, and easy to apply. You just scratch it into the soil or broadcast it across a lawn. It's incredibly popular because it works and it's affordable. The downside? It doesn't do anything to improve your soil's actual structure or biology. It's basically just plant food, not a soil builder. You'll typically use it at the start of a growing season or as a mid-season boost when your plants need a quick pick-me-up. Great tool when used right. Just don't overdo it or you risk burning your plants. Speaking of feeding your plants, the next amendment comes from a very different place, and it's been around a lot longer than anything in a plastic bag. Organic fertilizer. Organic fertilizer is exactly what it sounds like. Fertilizer derived from natural sources. Think feather meal, kelp meal, fish emulsion, worm castings, alfalfa meal. The list is long. The big difference from synthetic is that organic fertilizer feeds your soil as much as it feeds your plants. It encourages microbial activity, slowly improves soil structure over time, and releases nutrients gradually rather than all at once. That slow release is actually a huge benefit. It's much harder to burn your plants, and the nutrients stick around longer. The trade-off is that it works more slowly, so if your plant is in crisis, organic fertilizer might not be the fastest fix. You'll find organic fertilizer used heavily in vegetable gardens, raised beds, and by anyone focused on long-term soil health over quick results. It's a more holistic approach. You're not just feeding plants, you're feeding the whole ecosystem in your soil. And if you want to get hyper-specific about what nutrients you're adding, the next two amendments are basically laser-targeted tools for exactly that. Bone meal. Bone meal is ground up animal bones, usually steamed and dried, and it is one of the best natural sources of phosphorus you can add to your soil. Phosphorus is the nutrient most responsible for strong root development and flower and fruit production, which makes bone meal super popular with anyone growing bulbs, flowering plants, or fruit-bearing vegetables. You'll typically mix it into the planting hole when you're transplanting, or work it into the soil before planting bulbs in the fall. It also contains some calcium, which is a nice bonus. It breaks down slowly, so it's a long-term addition rather than an instant fix. One thing to know, if your soil is already high in phosphorus, adding more can actually lock out other nutrients. So a quick soil test before you throw this stuff around is always a smart move. Now, if bone meal is all about roots and blooms, the next amendment is basically the opposite end of that spectrum, and it works fast. Blood meal. Blood meal is dried animal blood. Yeah, exactly what it sounds like. And it is one of the highest natural sources of nitrogen you can find. If you've got plants that are looking pale, yellow, or just kind of sad and slow growing, nitrogen deficiency is usually the culprit, and blood meal can turn that around pretty quickly. It breaks down faster than most organic options, so you'll see results in a couple of weeks rather than months. It's often used in vegetable gardens on heavy feeders like corn, leafy greens, and squash. Word of caution though, A little goes a long way. It's potent, and over-applying it can absolutely burn your plants. Also worth knowing, the smell can attract animals, so if you got curious pets or wildlife nearby, just keep that in mind. Alright, we've covered feeding your plants. Now let's talk about something that feeds your soil in a much more complete way than any single fertilizer can. Compost. Compost might honestly be the greatest all-around soil amendment that exists. It's decomposed organic matter, kitchen scraps, yard waste, leaves, broken down by microbes into this dark, crumbly, incredible stuff that does just about everything. It improves drainage in clay soil, improves water retention in sandy soil, adds nutrients, boosts microbial life, and builds long-term soil structure. It truly does it all. You can make it yourself or buy it bagged, and either way, it's one of the most rewarding things you can add to any garden. Most gardeners work compost into beds at the start of each season and use it as a top dressing throughout the year. The nutrient content isn't super high compared to a dedicated fertilizer, but what compost does for your soil's overall health is unmatched. If there's one amendment every single gardener should be using consistently, it's this one. And on that note, there's another organic material that works a lot like compost, but comes with a little more controversy. Manure, aged or composted animal waste, is one of the oldest soil amendments in the book, and it's still one of the best. Cow, horse, chicken, and rabbit manure are the most common types, and each has a slightly different nutrient profile. Chicken manure, for example, is especially high in nitrogen. Like compost, manure improves soil structure, adds nutrients, and feeds soil biology. The key word here is aged or composted. Fresh manure is too hot and can burn plants, and it may carry pathogens you really don't want near your food crops. Well composted manure is safe, effective, and incredibly rich. It's typically worked into garden beds in the fall or early spring before planting. If you can get your hands on aged manure from a local farm, it's often free or very cheap, and it's fantastic. Just make sure no herbicides were in what the animals ate. Okay, we've been talking a lot about nutrients and biology. Let's shift gears and talk about soil structure, because the next few amendments are all about changing the physical properties of your soil. Perlite. Perlite is those little white, almost styrofoam-looking pellets you see mixed into potting soil. And it's actually volcanic glass that's been superheated until it pops, kinda like popcorn. That process makes it incredibly lightweight and full of tiny air pockets. The main job of perlite is to improve drainage and aeration. It doesn't compact, it doesn't break down, and it doesn't hold on to water. It just keeps space open in the soil so roots can breathe and excess water can move through. It's used heavily in container gardening and raised beds where drainage is critical, and it's practically essential for succulents and cacti. You'll also see it in seed starting mixes. It adds zero nutrients, so it's purely a structural amendment, but for what it does it really well. If perlite is all about drainage, the next amendment on the list is its close cousin, but with a very different superpower. Vermiculite. Vermiculite looks a lot like perlite. Small, light, kinda sparkly, but it behaves completely differently. While perlite drains fast, vermiculite holds water and nutrients. It's a naturally occurring mineral that expands when heated, and those expanded layers trap moisture and hold on to nutrients so they stay available to plant roots longer. It's great in seed starting mixes because it keeps the moisture level consistent and prevents seedlings from drying out. It's also useful in containers and raised beds where you want to improve water retention without making the soil heavy. It does improve aeration somewhat, but its real strength is moisture and nutrient retention. One thing to know, it's not as long-lasting as perlite in the soil, and it can break down over time. Great for containers, raised beds, and starting seeds. Now let's talk about two amendments that are incredibly similar on the surface, but come from very different places. and that difference matters more than you might think. Peat moss. Peat moss is partially decomposed sphagnum moss that's been harvested from bogs, and it has been a garden staple for decades. It's incredibly good at retaining moisture. It's naturally acidic, and it has a light, fluffy texture that improves soil structure and aeration. It's widely used in potting mixes, seed starting, and in in-ground beds, especially for acid-loving plants like blueberries, azaleas, and rhododendrons. Here's the thing, though. Peat moss has gotten a lot of attention lately for sustainability reasons. Peat bogs take thousands of years to form and are important carbon sinks, and harvesting them has real environmental consequences. It's still widely available and widely used, but a lot of gardeners are starting to move toward alternatives, which, funny enough, brings us perfectly to the next amendment, because it was basically designed to do what peat moss does without the baggage. Cocoa coir. Cocoa coir is made from the fibrous husks of coconuts. It's a byproduct of coconut processing, and it is rapidly becoming one of the most popular soil amendments around. It has a texture and moisture holding ability very similar to peat moss, but it's a renewable resource, it has a more neutral pH, and it's generally considered a much more sustainable choice. You'll find it in potting mixes, raised beds, and container gardens. It comes compressed into bricks. You soak it in water and it expands like crazy, which is always satisfying. Cocoa coir doesn't add nutrients, but it creates a really hospitable environment for roots and beneficial microbes. Some growers mix it with compost and perlite to create a really well-balanced growing medium. It drains well, holds moisture, and doesn't compact easily. The only thing to watch out for is to make sure the brand you choose is pre-rinsed. Otherwise, you may have to soak it in several water changes to bring its salt level down before you use it. Other than that, it's a fantastic amendment whether you're going fully organic, working in containers, or just trying to make a more sustainable choice in your garden. There you go. 10 soil amendments broken down fast. From fertilizers that feed your plants to structural amendments that transform your soil from the ground up. Each one has its place depending on what you're growing and what your soil actually needs. The best move you can make is getting a soil test so you're not just guessing. Then you'll know exactly which of these to reach for. Knowledge is a real superpower here, and now you've got it. That's all for now. Subscribe to see more.